and welcome to Global Payment Insights, a forum where Nuvo explores what tomorrow's payments will look like. With us is Lily Varon, a senior Forrester analyst who focuses on the payment strategies and technologies global firms need to win, serve, and retain customers in the age of digital business. Joining Lily is Yuval Ziv. In his role as president here at Nuvo, he leads worldwide product sales, marketing, client engagement, and AI-led capabilities. My name's Gavin Haycock. I'm part of the team here working with business leaders and industry influencers to share insights designed to help merchants navigate the changing world of payments. Lily and Yuval will discuss what they see informing the next generation of payment platforms. And so with that, over to you both. And perhaps, Lily, maybe we could start with some introductory insights on the evolving payments landscape, which Yuval can then build on.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation. And, I think it's really timely, right? Because us living amidst a global pandemic, and we'll try not to dwell on that because I know we're all sort of tired of hearing about it despite its ongoing status. But the pandemic really exposed kind of vulnerabilities in our system, right? And some folks at the beginning of the pandemic were thinking, oh, well, this is gonna make consumers more conservative. This is going to trigger, sort of a reclusive kind of, set us back perhaps a little bit in our, the technology advancements or the kind of new and different customer experiences. Well, in fact, the opposite was true. And specifically, payments was a really interesting example of that, but precisely because of the vulnerabilities that were exposed throughout the past few years, consumers were more ready to experiment, to find new ways to interact with brands, to meet their goals, to get the products and services that they needed, right? So that in order to build resilience, precisely because of that those exposed vulnerabilities. So we have this moment where consumers, specifically in the payments realm, finally are in the US, we've been really, really stuck in our old payments habits. And so, we start seeing digital payments adoption, contactless payments adoption, like we've seen in other markets across the globe. The US has been sort of slower to come by. So I think that's one big interesting theme. And it links to this, the increasing sort of strategic importance of payments. I know we've talked about this before, Yuval, where, payments has moved from a cost center for a lot of organizations into a revenue driver, right? And a way in which firms can actually enable new business models, increase conversion or increase basket size, or things like this. And that has brought a fascinating tension point with the providers in this space, right? The folks who are helping merchants build these payments experiences, process these payments, where we call payments the invisible, invaluable, right? They need to happen so seamlessly, right? Customers don't want better payments experiences. They just want to meet their goals. They want better shopping experiences. So they need to happen seamlessly, invisibly, embedded, right? There's a lot of talk of embedded these days. But they're also more valuable to the organization than they've ever been before, precisely because of the fragmentation of business models or the fragmentation of digital touch points, which I know we'll talk about later. So it puts really interesting pressure on the providers in the landscape to deliver that experience and deliver that sort of ongoing innovation. But so that's kind of the thing I wanted to dive into first is, this shift in the increasing kind of strategic importance of payments. And I know you've thought about this a lot too, right?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having us, Lily. And I couldn't agree more. I have seen over the last, even before the pandemic, but definitely pandemic, gave it to some sort of acceleration, where payment manager in the past was considered not only the cost center, but mainly one that just reacting rather than joining as strategic partner into the decision of which product to release, how can we monetize this product, which geography should we target, and are we ready to this geography, from payment, from currency, from taking the money out of the country and getting it back. So all sorts of questions, discussions that in the past would have happened without the payment management. Suddenly payment management become very strategic, and it's not only because the recognition of the importance of it, it's also as companies realize that payment flow, the way the user pay, the experience of the pay in and also of the payout, we will touch base on that as well, is super significant for their customers, clients, loyalty. And as such, they want to connect faster, better, become closer to the end user requirements or preference, and they realize that payment becomes a crucial part of it. We can give so many examples, but if you look at companies that in the past, if we look at the payment methods itself, that in the past we're thinking only on maybe cards is enough, debit card. The fact that they've added even credit card was already a big step for them. Suddenly they are looking at a checkout experience that includes at least the top 3, 4, 5 alternative to cards with the local markets, the issuing card schemes that are within the local geographies. The flow of the entire checkout is felt as if you are taking part in the same recognized flow, and it doesn't matter if you are now buying in store, online, in your mobile, it's all the same shopping experience that follows together with the user wherever he goes. And then the interaction between the company and the user is becoming much more closer. We've seen it also in the fact that companies out there realize that they have a lot of data on preference of the users, how to serve the user, and also how to accept payments easily from the user, how and where the user prefers to pay with. And as such, as handing over all of this data, the merchant understand that now they have choice. They can choose which payment methods, they can choose how to connect with their clients, and therefore they came back to what was recognized in the past as more payment provider and becoming into a relationship of collaboration, of partnership. Now it's payment partner, simply because the payment company out there is no longer just to serve the payments, it's to help. The whole goal now is how can you help your clients even further to explore new opportunities, new ways of payments, converting. Remember that yes, payment usually comes at the end of the flow, when you are already after the user chose, you brought the user as a merchant, the user chose the product from the catalog, the user wants to transact, but this specific last milestone is super crucial in basically converting the whole funnel from a visitor or a client into a buyer, into a payer. And therefore it's the whole strategic approach towards how can we streamline the payments, how can we make sure that the transaction goes successfully, no matter which location, when, timing, payment methods, became super crucial for organizations.
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating to me is that there's sort of two things happening at once, where, finally in some strategic markets, there is more digital payments adoption, and there's pressure for merchants to build commerce experiences that extend into these fragmented digital touch points, and then but also sort of in so doing, to your point, really relying on the payments partners, the processors and gateways and orchestrators and all these solutions out there for determining, which of these devices that consumers use do we need to have digital experiences and support commerce? In which of these platforms that live on these devices do we need to have, commerce experiences and payments experience supported? In which of these interaction modes, whether it be SMS or the GUI or voice or whatever, what is hot or hype? There's a lot of talk of Bitcoin and Web3 and other cryptocurrencies, etc. All of this moment, the fact that payments is becoming this it never less important as an interaction point, but also the needing to rely on the payments partners as this partner rather than this vendor. But what I'm finding with the merchants that I'm talking to is that they're forced to make some trade-offs, right? Because you have vendors in this space that have specializations. You might have to choose between someone that has massive scale or someone that has modern architecture and modern technology, or you have to choose between someone who is an in-person payment specialist and someone who's an online sort of digital, first kind of mobile payments, digital payments, that kind of thing, the online world specialist. Or you have those that are super, focused. It's a full-time job to keep on top of the card scheme mandates and standards and things like this. So you have folks who focus so heavily on the card space that might, in certain geographies, not have, the sort of local schemes or local payment methods, especially if it's cash-based and or bank-based, right? And so we've got merchants that are sort of building this more multi-acquirer, multi-vendor ecosystem to support their payments experiences across the globe, creating the kind of its own challenge of patchwork kind of reconciliation, or you've got folks that are making really tough calls about what we can't do or can't have, or it's a really fascinating moment in the provider space at this moment, because you've got these merchants that truly have very, very broad use cases, multiple use cases, and they want to consolidate, they want to build these unified customer experiences. They may not always find that with one provider, and the providers are getting kind of smarter about coexisting and competing with one another side by side, sort of all putting the customer first, in this case the merchant, right, and trying to do best for the merchant. So that's one thing. There's another thing I want to dive into about kind of the provider landscape and how it's shifting, but that's kind of one interesting trend I wanted to talk about today, because it's this shifting role of the payments partner as this plumbing kind of vendor, that the less I have to think about it, the better, to more of one that there's proactive kind of customer success and consultative advisory and more strategic kind of engagement, right, from the payments ecosystem.
Completely agree, and we've seen this shift from, first of all, on the provider side. Let's start with the fact that the merchant themselves are asking for the choice. They want to have the choice. They want to have the freedom to decide, or what we call a la carte service, right? They want to decide now that the risk management they will take from partner X, the payment in North America or in Asia they will take from partner Y, and still they are required to all of those efforts of integrations and contracts and reconciliation and working with all of those partners. So in the old days, you could have seen one single merchant integrating to multiple providers just in order to make sure that they have enough redundancies, let's call it, as each one of those providers requested either long-term agreement, either commitments, either some sort of, I would call it contractual binding relationship. These days, we see the approach completely different, where we actually recognize partner and merchants sitting together, collaborating, understanding, first of all, what is the need of the merchant, and then allowing to choose with one integration, one API, with one contract usually, allowing them to choose which acquirer they want to send the traffic to. All the orchestration layers that are out there, including ours, by the way, are enabling the merchants to take the decision based on costs, based on product initiatives, based on business rules, fraud management rules, whatever the rule is, they can take the decision on where to send the traffic to. That's in terms of cards, in terms of APNs, in terms of all the different services that are available, even risk management. Yeah. The other initiative that you touched based on, and I think that it's super interesting, is how those payment providers, partners out there, managing to continue innovating while the industry is changing. You touched base very briefly on orchestration and also on crypto management. All of those functionalities are just examples of additional either means of payments, either in additional verticals, additional innovation that activities that are happening out there, that the payment companies needs to not only find themselves up to speed, integrated, fully supporting those initiatives, but more than that, maintaining the level of flexibility that if a merchant starts with you in a very limited scope, you always allow them to broaden the scope as fast as possible. So we see a lot of the times that merchants prefers to start slowly. They want to see how the transaction flows is going, the acceptance rates, is it high, is it low, how the performance of the reconciliation, if they are happy from the service, and then suddenly they understand that, hey, they want not only US, they want suddenly also Brazil, and maybe also Portugal, and maybe also China. And the scope, not just in terms of partnership, but also their business scope that is receiving the appetite and growing in the market, needs to be served also by the payment partner. Payment partner needs to be flexible, collaborative, and also allow all of those innovation in. Otherwise, it will not support the growth needs of the merchants.
One of the things that is is really interesting too is this pressure. It's exactly sort of that, right? The payments vendors needing to dig into their own data, their own insights, their own kind of crystal balling a little bit where they need to go, where they need to be, how they need to build the support for these emerging use cases before there's massive merchant demand, right? And at the same time, what we see, another really interesting tension point is this idea of, okay, the payments vendors are really getting much better at using their own data to advise and be strategic consultants to the merchants. Some of those vendors are also exposing that data directly to the merchants to self-service, self-diagnose, make their own strategic decisions, use the tool, use the dashboards and the reporting, and even where some vendors are starting to surface even benchmarking data, right? To say, okay, your rates for a merchant that looks like you in your geography, if they have enough scale, they can kind of do these things. And yet we've got this it's not necessarily, it seems somewhat antithetical, right? You have merchants who want this more consultative relationship, want this more strategic partnership with their merchant, with their payment vendor, and yet they're also demanding a lot more of that data transparency, a lot more of that visibility into the authorization rates and rejection rates and failures and why and where they should be, where they were, where they might be, all of that data. They're sort of demanding a bit more self-service, which I find kind of interesting. It's the marriage of the old world and the new world, right? The old world of payments was, let me call up my account rep to solve this problem for me. The new world, the latest world was, let me see the dashboard. Let me roll my sleeves up and get into the data. And if I have a problem, I'll submit a ticket and hear back in 24 hours. And now we've got this kind of, we need the best of both worlds, and merchants are really demanding kind of the best of both worlds, which is tough, because then you have to, as a merchant, as a vendor, determine, what is actionable, what is useful, how do we expose this data securely and make sure we're not sort of, violating any kind of compliance standards and whatnot. But also, what can we automate and what shouldn't we automate? What, this kind of this tension between self-service and full service or managed service and consulting, to what can be an engine that sort of automates on the back end, what can we use machine learning for, versus what do we need the lifetime of payments expertise that we have with the employees, with the people we have in our organization, and bring that to bear for the best results for the merchant. That to me is a really, really fascinating tension point in the vendor space right now, that I see kind of evolving, or the tension point is here, and it'll be really interesting to see how vendors in this space kind of solve for that.
So couldn't agree more. I think that first of all, the access to the data became crucial over the last couple of years for many different approaches, right? From first, and maybe the most common one is improving acceptance rates. Each merchant wants to reach within this geography, within this product, within the capability, to the maximum acceptance rates that he can reach. And as such, he needs the data. He needs to understand what is it that he is doing right, what is it that he is doing wrong, and what others are doing that maybe placed his own business into some sort of a disadvantage, and how can he differentiate himself from the industry. So data is crucial. Transparency that you mentioned is also crucial, but because at the end of the day, those relationships between the merchants to the provider, these are relationships of trust. We are handling the last milestone, but maybe one of the most important milestones, which is the financial aspect of the transaction, of the whole shopping experience, and as such, transparency on the cost, transparency of the payment methods, transparency of the flow and how to improve the flows, and also allowing the merchant to understand, based on those data, what actions he needs to take. If you're looking at orchestration layers, then when we present the data of what acceptance or what can be improved in the acceptance rates, we are also allowing the merchant to take this action immediately, or to do some A/B testing between the multiple providers that we are connected to. All of that brings us into a situation where the data serves not only for transparency and analytics, but also to take actions. More than that, I see that, yeah?
Oh, a question, where do you fall on this idea of like letting merchants design and execute their own testing versus sort of you guys thinking about, that on behalf of, because to some, there's there's some risk in letting the merchants kind of run with this, right? They might enable a payment method that might have commercial terms that actually end up, a lot of the trend right now is to keep the payment methods, the sort of self-serve enabling, toggle a payment method on and off without kind of establishing direct relationships with the payment mechanism itself. But they might enable a payment method that the commercial terms then actually end up hurting them in the long term. And where do you think testing in particular falls on this spectrum today of merchant self-service versus partner managed service?
So I personally see it way before the testing. Testing is already after you understood as a merchant where and how you're going to execute on your payment strategy. The first thing is consulting, right? We are here to listen to our merchants to understand what are they trying to achieve, if it's a specific market, if it's a specific model, if it's a recurring billing, subscription-based memberships, or is it a one-time, if they want all digital and therefore the delivery of the goods, but also the delivery of the payment needs to be instant. If it's something else, all remember that all connected at the end of the day also to the risk management, and how do we prevent the fraud and manage the revenue assurance of the entire environment. So from our perspective, we do not believe in off-the-shelf product or go ahead, do it yourself, customize and forget about it, don't talk with us. No, we are on the very much other side of the story where we customize a lot. We are sitting, analyzing, consulting with our merchants what is the best practices that we see, and then obviously allowing him together with us to test as many almost unlimited cases of cashier implementation of pay in and pay out, the whole payment page experience, the payment page blend, the currencies blend, what is wrong and right for him, testing on a staging environment before launching in live. We are also a great believer in customization to the actual need of the specific merchant in a specific location, in a specific time frame. Things are changing. A merchant that is used to PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard in the US, when he is targeting Germany all of a sudden, we need to educate him that without Sofort Überweisen and GiroPay and ELV and SEPA Instant and open banking, not only that he will face difficulty in accepting the payment, it will also reduce the conversion. Or if we go and still within the data and the transparency, if we go towards strong customer authentication that is super known in Europe, not necessarily in other locations in the world, many of the providers out there just informed the merchant, hey, you need to go and integrate into a 3D Secure. We have a completely different approach where not only that we are the MPI, we are the 3D Secure provider, we are also helping the merchant to route the traffic based on rule and AI machine learning offering between the different mandates of the 3D Secure, and therefore saving a lot of those soft declines and helping the merchant to convert and helping the merchant to handle those local, regional compliance needs. All of that is based on data, on transparency, and mainly on collaboration, which is a bit different than the off-the-shelf, just take a product and go live with it. A lot of attention and consulting approach here.
I have a little bit of a controversial opinion around this, which is I think merchants focus too much on the next payment method they need to support. I think that's your job. I think that the providers need to know which payment methods are necessary in which markets, which ones are valuable for this merchant in this category, in these use cases. I think that is tables to me, that is the value that a payment vendor needs to bring to a merchant, right? You guys have to have the connections, the portfolio, and the insight to determine which are the payment methods. That to me is the bare minimum. What I think merchants underappreciate and underemphasize is their strategic kind of decisions around the channels and customer journeys where payments could exist or could be better, right? What is it maybe about supporting if you're embarking in a chat, kind of support channel, why do you force a redirect to the e-commerce experience to finish the transaction? If you've got a customer in the IVR channel, why are you either forcing them at the end of the call to go to this payments, the secure payment experience at the end of the phone call, or exposing customer data to the sales, or service rep where the customer's reading out? I was in the airport the other day and a customer was reading out her payment credit card information next to me at the ticket counter, right? So there's I think so much more emphasis for me. It's so much more important for the merchants to determine it's sort of what we talked about before, the fragmentation of digital touch points, right? Where I might be navigating my digital life on WhatsApp on my iPhone, or WhatsApp, on my computer, and actually maybe I'm prefer to use voice on my WhatsApp. All of the layers. I think merchants oversimplify what omni-channel means, and think of online to offline, but that online is so fragmented. My colleague Julie Osk, a fellow analyst here at Forrester, has this incredible research on the 3D connected consumer, about the multi-device, multi-platform, multi-interaction mode, and the myriad kind of ways these things can interact. Like, that is the reality of consumers' digital lives. And so merchants have to think about where commerce naturally could exist and where it does, but maybe in imperfect ways, rather than focusing on what's the next payment method I should support, that I should accept. I think that is actually it should be in an easy consultative, advice from the payment partners in that space.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you more than that. The actual specific payment methods almost means nothing if the entire shopping experience, if the entire payment experience is not working for you there. It's omni-channel. It's about the overall blend. It's about identifying what your clients prefer to use in the offline, in the online, and how do you bring both of those experiences as close, as streamlined together. It's about making sure that you are always available to the user for his refunds, for his disputes, for his customer care needs, not on, and all of that is coming back to payment methods. I agree, because every payment method needs eventually to support the strong customer authentication or the recurring billing, or to be able to refund it quickly. If you are in a model of shared economy, then you want to recognize that your user just yesterday used your scooter or your taxi, and to offer him exactly the same payment methods with the one click of his finger. Those are the things that are coming as what I'm calling a payment experience, which is way more important than just a single payment method. And you are right, the payment partner out there needs to advise, need to consult, and need to come ready with the predefined recommendations of the specific location, the specific business model, what are the correct blend of payment methods, currencies, languages, but also what are the overall initiative that a merchant needs to use, the risk management, the risk versus opportunity of each one of those payment methods, the reconciliation, how can the merchant eventually see most out of his efforts, right? So it's not only the acceptance rates and conversion, also what is used conveniently by the user,
I think
right?
reconciliation is probably the most triggering word in payments, because it's so painful, right? And this is where folks wince when they hear the word, because it is not easy. It is not
easy. It's also scary, right? Reconciliation is a scary big word. It can be easy. Using the correct tools, it can actually be almost seamless to a merchant, even a global merchant that is using multiple payment methods, each one of them with different currency and with different frequency of settlement. All of that is possible. Again, I believe that it's all, at the end of the day, part, and it brings us back to the topic of payment management within an organization. It's not only, hey, let's add another payment method. I heard that it's an important one or a cool one. Let's make sure that the entire flow, front end, back end, is complete within the payment organization before you blend it in.
And I wonder if you could maybe touch on a couple of other themes, like one, the power of scalable innovation. So perhaps maybe a little bit of just dissecting debate between you two around how you can take innovations in one vertical, maybe gaming, and that's applying into other verticals. I'm thinking here about pay-ins, payouts. And also the other dynamic, it seemed the payments industry was so bent on globalization of payments. And we've definitely, it looks like, seen a lot of the localization of payments, the fact that in country or even in market within countries, being able to provide everything for everyone by yourself is a bit of a tall ask. And I just would be interested in sort of a Forrester Yuval view on that.
Sure. So I can jump in first with the first point, which is innovation from one industry, one vertical to overall, or how those verticals interact in terms of payment. Because payment, at the end of the day, most of the times, one flow might serve more than one vertical. I can name our examples of you mentioned pay in and payout, so definitely functionality of deposits and withdrawals that is common a lot in the financial industry, in the gaming industry. Once we developed it and the capability reached to a level of even net deposit, so we can recognize per payment method, per payer, what is the net that is left out there in his entire balance in order to be used, not only the pay-in and the payout, but what is also left out there after all of the reconciliation of, it can be winnings, it can be refunds, it can be chargebacks, all of those together with the deposits. What we've basically done is that we've taken this capability that we have developed kind of early stage in the industry, and inherited it also to our marketplaces. So today, every marketplace out there that is working with us, they have the split payment in. They need to serve multiple sellers, accept payments from multiple shoppers, from multiple sellers, but then at the end, they need also to split those payments in a payout functionality. And payout functionality can be on cards, it can be on open banking, it can be on ACH RTP, it can be in many different ways, means of payment for the pay-in and for the payout. So those specific functionalities that we have developed for one vertical is now offered across the board to all of the other industries. You can see it also in insurance companies that they are paying the claims back to the user or to the provider. All of those functionalities, pay in and payout, is fully embedded now within our platform and offered to the rest. I will allow Lily to start with the second question, and then I will join as well.
You know, one of the things, the innovation at scale. I mean, I think one of the things is the architecture allows, right? SaaS allows the seamless kind of updates and the benefit to one to benefit to all. And to the extent, I mean, you talked about kind of the importance of customization in the enterprise space. And I think that's another interesting tension point to go back to like the beginning of our conversation, right? The need for customization and yet the need for innovation to be distributed across the ecosystem. But to your point, digital kind of opens up opportunities that are cross-industry things, you know, digital business models, digital operations, clouds, you know, the cloud, like platforms and marketplaces, subscriptions or recurring billing, pay-ins and payouts, all of the different kind of payments flows that are emerging are emerging cross industry, right? It is what digital kind of has enabled. And so you can see where, you know, supporting the newest sort of token, to card on file tokens or quote network tokens, right? That really started out in these digital only high, you know, subscription kind of recurring scenarios for global merchants are now kind of trickling into other industries and other merchants where card on file is a thing. So yeah, I mean, I would argue that at the basest, simplest level, there's kind of two things working in our favor to kind of drive innovation at scale. One is that SaaS architecture is making it easier to kind of distribute software updates, and then secondly, that the trends that are popping up and innovations that are becoming interesting actually blur the lines of industry because digital does that, right? You know, so that's kind of my thinking around that. But you have to have the time and the energy and the partners. That this is the other thing, the advice I give merchants all the time is, what is your pace of innovation? What is your style of innovation? How do you innovate? Because do you as a business tend to do big market opportunity assessments and then, you know, move in that direction? Do you wait and see how others are doing it? And then, you know, are you very much sort of let's say research and development focused in your opportunity assessments and your innovation, or are you fail fast, right? Are you, let's try it, let's see what breaks, because you have vendors, the providers in the space that innovate in those ways. And usually they're mutually exclusive. If you've got folks who do this huge, thorough and important research in market opportunity sizing, and then you have others who, hey, this new thing just popped up, let's try it and see what works. And you've got that kind of testing and experimentation model. You need to find a partner that innovates like you innovate. So know thyself in terms of you know what kind of innovation you want from the provider space. Do you want to be led? Do you want to be you know, do you want to, anyway, so that to me is kind of interesting too. It's not necessarily about scaling innovation, but it's finding who's in lockstep with you in your own innovation journey as well, and at the pace of innovation that you're comfortable with as an organization.
And Gavin, I will connect Lily's statement now to your second point. You've touched based on globalization versus localization, and I will connect it to innovation as well, right? So we had an example of a merchant going live with us, and they seeked a very detailed customization of the entire checkout experience, right? Not only the payment page, for the pay-in, for the payout, not only the payment methods, but also as they went global, they went into geographies where it's more than just accepting the global payment schemes out there. It's also the local ones. If you're looking at Brazil, suddenly the PIX initiative. If you're looking at Europe, then suddenly all of those local schemes such as Carta Banquier and Bancontact and others, Ideal and more. And what they were looking for is for customization of blending it into some sort of flow that will make sense for a user, that it will not be too many payment methods out there, right? It will be only the correct ones that are the proper fit for users, even if users are moving from one place to the other. And those customizations, to me, blend somehow the innovation and the flexibility. As Lily mentioned, the partner needs to be innovative, but needs to be the correct partner for you, because if you are looking for a very well customized, you need someone that will listen and that will be able to execute, but also someone that is connected already and have the capability to acquire all of the transactions within those local payment methods out there. And there are many. It's not only those global methods, it's also those specific local ones that are relevant to specific locations. You could also see that the localization is moving into one step forward with countries that are taking their own initiative, if it's El Salvador with the crypto, or if it's locations that came with their own card schemes suddenly, right? So it's all, at the end of the day, connected. If you're looking at Chinese user that is traveling to Heathrow Airport tomorrow morning, most probably he will be using one of our offline QR codes that are stated there, that allows him to transact with his own known payment methods, of which are Alipay and others. So all of those localization and allowing the user to feel at home when he is transacting online or offline is super crucial. And I think that this is one example that we see the, I don't know if to call it the tension, but the decision point between going only global or making it local is, again, based on acceptance rates. We see that some of our merchants are having the decision if to open up a local entity, a local office, a local operation in a certain country that has become very big for them. Until then, they served it globally, either cross-border, and they now, once it's big enough, they decide to go local. And then, indeed, they need a provider that is capable to serve them globally from one point, one geography worldwide, or allowing them to serve their users domestically, locally, where brings on one hand opportunity for much higher, most of the time, much higher acceptance rates, increasing acceptance rates, but also brings a different aspect to it, which is the setup of the company, the tax rates, the VATs, and how to handle the currencies and what's right and wrong. All of those are part of the consulting approach that I believe a company, a provider out there needs to have, and listen to the merchant come and serve and come with ideas of how to tackle each one of those challenges. Some of those movements, if we name, for example, the Brexit, might at the end of the day force a merchant into a specific setup, right? So you are right that on the globalization perspective, yes, there are events out there that are forcing also a change in the payment flow of the organization that is currently targeting UK versus Europe or any other, and as such, us helping as a provider, helping them to set it up properly and identifying what is right for their business is super crucial.
I think we've naturally, interestingly, come across kind of like if we imagine dials on a dashboard that merchants can kind of, turn and customize in order to find the right match kind of payment provider, it is, on one spectrum, sort of global and local, right? Where do you need that local presence, that local entity, or the merchant to, the vendor to have that local presence, and when do you need that cross-border? We talked about sort of going backwards, right? We talked about kind of payments flows and innovation, right? What pace of innovation, you're finding where you are on that dial of speed and pace of innovation, and then that the automation versus sort of or self-service with consultative, the consultative piece. Where on that dashboard do you live as a merchant, and where do you want to be, and where do you find that partnership? What am I missing, right? There was that global local, that strategic partnership versus self-service, that data accessibility, that pace of innovation, right? We've kind of targeted just naturally in this conversation some really key kind of decision points that merchants have to kind of self-diagnose their requirements and their needs, and can be really useful in determining which payment vendors / partners would be right for them, even in a world in which they're likely kind of working with multiple.
I agree, and I think that this is a part of the fact that the industry and the vertical is very fragmented, right? The payment is not similar in each one of the geographies. If you're a merchant that is currently targeting LATAM, then you will recognize that unlike Europe or unlike US, each of those countries is completely different, even within the regulation of payment, but even within the payment methods. And the same goes to APAC, the same goes even to Europe, where you do have the PSD framework that defining the regulation, but actually every country in Europe is still completely different in terms of payment methods. And the same goes all over the world. And when you are targeting globally, it doesn't matter if you do it locally or you do it from one single point, you are still required to a lot of questions of how to customize per location and which payment methods blend is the right for me and how to serve the merchant properly. But at the end of the day, it all comes to what your clients, your user needs to have in order to feel convenient, in order to be comfortable with
their goals,
exactly, to achieve the goals.
Yeah. I mean, wow, so much ground covered here, and really, really great to get your perspectives on some of the key dynamics that are driving what's required today to deliver the payments platforms of tomorrow. And as you say, we've heard about the importance of customization across payment flows, alternative payment methods, a la carte solutions that get to the heart of a merchant's local and broader business aspirations. Also, I guess, it's got to focus on the power of partnerships, but importantly, the value of the human touch. So Lily and Yuval, wow, thank you so much for joining us today. Really insightful, really engaging, relevant and timely. And thank you too for everyone who's been watching, and look forward to joining again soon.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you, Lily.
So fun.